ceasefire Trump announced on Tuesday morning seems to be holding for now. But President Trump was not best pleased when both Iran and Israel broke it yesterday. Just have a listen to what he said.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
Well, that's one presidential way of putting it. But overnight, a leaked intelligence report cast doubts on President Trump's claims that Iran's nuclear program was obliterated, as he had said, in Saturday's strikes. In fact, a Pentagon source that comes from the Pentagon told the US media that Iran had only been set back by a few months. But Trump has branded that fake news. Hear what he said?
They hit the target perfectly, wiped it out. And the press is very disrespectful. Everyone hit. And it's very disrespectful to those great geniuses and patriots that flew those planes through tremendous dangers.
But is he still winning you over? Has he done the right thing? I'm going to go straight to you. I don't want to call you Caroline. So, Carole.
Just call me Carole. That's fine. I've been called worse. Yeah, he is winning me over because there are lots of things wrong with Donald Trump, but the one thing I admire about him, he sees the world in terms of deals. He believes you can make a deal for peace, and that's what he tried to do here. And he has to be commended. The people who are saying he didn't wipe them out, he did. Those bombs went thousands of feet down.
Well, how do you know?
Well, because I've read about it over the past 3 days.
But what do you make of the reports that say...
Well, it's a Pentagon source, an unnamed source. I don't necessarily believe it. But what I'm saying is, he has to be commended for hitting these 3 major nuclear sites. We have leaders all over the world who are always going on about Iran and rogue states and tyrants, and they do nothing about it. They just sit there, and these rogues and tyrants see them sitting there doing nothing as a weakness. Trump won't have that. He's just gone in and bombed them. And he wants this war to end. He's just said that on every level. He's not the first American PM who has tried to bring peace to the Middle East, and he won't be the last. But at least he does something about it. He follows through with what he says, and he has followed through. And, he wants the war to end. And yes, I get the fact he has an ego. He wants to be seen as a peacemaker. I know all of that. But he's the only democratic leader who's actually in the world doing anything about the threat of Iran.
What would you make, Radzi, of that language? And also, it's an interesting thing. He wasn't just criticising Iran. Some people might be won over by the fact that this is the first time as an American president, right? Many of whom, especially in the Republican Party, that's saying he's doing the bidding just of Israel, where he actually criticises Israel as well. Has that won you over a little bit more, bearing in mind how critical you've been of Israel's actions in Gaza?
Well, we've learned that Trump drops busting bombs, but he also drops F-bombs outside of the White House, the first ever president to do it, making history there. With Trump, you never know what he's going to do. What I will say about the profane language is he owns it. I think that was intentional. He didn't apologise for that. If that was Keir Starmer that did that, he'd apologise. There'd be some investigation about how the language came out of his mouth. Should he step down? But no, not Trump. And I think his strength comes from his unpredictability, hence people having to tiptoe around the guy. I don't necessarily agree with what he's saying. And to your point specifically about his MAGA base, I think, come from 2 ends. I think he's split them. You've got the America First that will be saying, this is not what we want. And then you have the jingoism as well. So by addressing Iran and Israel, what he's actually really doing is prioritising America within that. So I actually think it was quite a clever, nuanced way of bringing back his support.
I think the F-bomb was absolutely intentional because he said the word and then he said to the reporter, have you got that?
Yeah.
So it was absolutely intentional. And yes, he's hacked off with Netanyahu because the deal would have been that he made with him, I'll do these nuclear sites, these 3 nuclear sites, and then the fighting stops. And of course, within a day, they're both dropping bombs again. So of course he's furious. He spent billions of pounds dropping those bombs, thinking this would help bring it all to an end. And then they've started again. These are 2 countries who want to fight, and it's going to be very, very difficult to stop them. And Iran isn't going to stop because...
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, it has actually brought it to an end. There were many doomsayers, right? Certainly in the short term, it's quietened down. There were doomsayers saying, look, what's going to happen? America's going to bomb, and that is the slippery slope to World War III, right? And it turns out that actually, whether these have been effective or not, to be determined, it at least has brought these two parties to
they
quietness.
have. But Trump will know the danger of the ceasefire not holding is that could bring China and Russia into it. If it keeps on going, he's very aware of that. So that's one of the reasons internationally he wants it to end.
And specifically, you mentioned Trump likes deals. For him to be successful, the peace has to hold. So now it's a case of suck it and see. We will now find out if the peace doesn't hold, Trump has failed. That will be his perception. That will be, dare I say, our perception.
On that note, there's been some, very flattering messages from the head of NATO to President Trump. Mark Rutte on Truth Social yesterday wrote, Mr. President, dear Donald, congratulations and thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary and something no one else dared to do. It makes us all safer. Now, that is the head of NATO.
Completely true. The thing is, everybody, that's the thing about Trump, all the other leaders, can you imagine Starmer ordering something like that? All the other world leaders are saying what Iran is doing is terrible, all the rest of it. Trump is the only person prepared to do anything about it. And that's, I think, what makes him an important asset in the world now for world peace. And a lot of people will be thanking him in years to come if he's taken Iran out. They will.
So his point is, your point is that peace through strength. In other words, what Thatcher used to say, she said, when I get out of politics, I'm going to open a shop. It's going to be called Rent a Spine. I mean, what do you make of that sort of view of politics?
That messaging it's bizarre. That kind of necessity for kind of sycophantic messaging. You're so incredible. You're wonderful. I would have thought specifically the head of NATO would actually be very erudite. They'd be just incredibly, almost military in their language. It would be, this is what we've done. This is what the aim is, either objective, complete or not.
So the whole point is, in order to go to the White House, to get him to do anything, you have to speak Donald Trump.
I think you do.
In other words, a kind of fawning way that people have said
to
that
be fair,
Keir Starmer speaks to him.
He would do it without the fawning, I'm pretty sure. And this is the first leader of a democratic society that has taken on the tyrants and the bullies of the Middle East. No one else would dare to do it. And that's what makes him strong, I think. It also makes him quite dangerous because he's unpredictable. We don't necessarily know what he's going to do next. But no one else would have done what he's done.
Well, let's go to South Yorkshire and you, Jeff. Look, there's been overnight some doubt cast over whether these big bunker busters have actually worked in Iran, but whether they have or they haven't. Has he started to win you over with his, let's call it the F-bomb, Jeff?
Well, to be honest, Rob, I've always supported Donald Trump. I think he's the most successful president America's ever had.
Right.
And,
why is that? What's your top reason for that, Jeff?
Basically, he just says what he's going to do, and he does it.
So you like the way he speaks?
Like
you like the way he speaks?
Not only way, I like his actions. I mean, he can speak what he likes, but his actions, he does those actions, and that's what makes him Donald Trump.
Well, thanks very much, Jeff. I think, what Jeff is talking about, millions of people that voted for him will have the same impulse. This idea that here's a man that doesn't speak like a politician. No. He speaks, whether you believe it or not, authentically. And people connect with that. Now, whether or not it's a mirage, when they think that politicians are telling them what they actually feel, they may even drink the sand of that mirage.
I would agree if I thought he was speaking authentically. My question would be, would he ever admit when he's wrong? And when you see him obfuscating around an issue, it's all very much so strongly, so bigly, and all these strange kind of, what actually are you saying? What do you stand for? And we know some people think we know what he stands for, but I just don't...
Why are you confused about what he stands for? I think he couldn't be clearer about what he stands for. I think he says absolutely. I think that's his strength.
Well, the question is for many people is whether he stands for, peace perhaps, or whether he chiefly stands for Donald Trump. But we're going to be taking more of your calls on whether Trump is winning you over. Give us a call. More of your calls on whether President Trump is winning you over. 027 862 2222. That's the number you need to call. Now, Carole, back to you before we go to Surrey. The thing about this is that Trump seems to speak in a way which seems to appeal to people.
He resonates, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's no bull, basically. You know, he just says it like it is. And you could see he was angry there. You know, even with Netanyahu, you know, everyone thinks he's on Israel's side. He's fed up with them because the deal would have been, I'll help you out here, and the fighting stops. And of course, Netanyahu started it again. And he was fed up with Netanyahu before. He wanted it to end before. He was losing patience with him. So now you can see his anger there. It's real. You know, lots of politicians try to keep the calm, they keep chill. Right. He wasn't. He was furious.
So that sense of keeping it real is what really attracts, him to people and voters. Mark, are you won over by President Trump, or do you, like others, think that this is just a mirage and nonsense?
It's a mirage. I've never believed what comes out of Trump's mouth. It's all about him. He calls it Truth Social. His website should be Lies Social, because a lot of stuff that he comes out with, even over Gaza. If that's the case, he wants to stop wars. Why hasn't he stopped Israel bombing Gaza and attacking them even now to this day? The same thing with Ukraine. He's only after two things. It's, with Gaza, it's the property and land, and with Ukraine, it's the minerals. And also this talk with NATO sucking up to him because they want to stay on board with him on order for him to support NATO, which he says he doesn't even support.
Well, it's an interesting thing. Thanks very much for calling. You know, Dennis, I'm going to go to you in Wrexham. We just had Mark talking about what NATO's feelings towards President Trump, but he's had a message from NATO today in, Trumpian terms, saying, well done, Mr. President, for bombing Iran. And on top of that, they've also managed to, through Trump, I suppose, to get all of the members of NATO to spend more on their defence and GDP because of him. So perhaps some of the kind of Trumpian muscle and language has worked. Has he won you over in Wrexham, Dennis?
Yes, he has.
But why is that?
Why? Because I think he stands by what he says. Mm-hmm. I think he doesn't hold back. And I think if Joe Biden would have been there, nothing would have been done.
Yeah. So you're pleased with him for his actions. Let me ask you, Dennis, is there a British politician that you can think of that sort of speaks in the way that Trump does? And do you think British politics would be better off for it if there was someone like him?
Yes, some of them, yeah.
Well, who's your British Trump? You can think about it. I put you on the spot there. I mean, obviously some people...
There isn't one.
You don't think there is one?
I don't think there's a single politician, Labour or Tory. The only one I can think of is Farage, who has always said what he thought, and at one time was hated for it. Now he's revered for it. His popularity is increasing tenfold.
Dennis Skinner would have.
Yes,
Dennis Skinner
completely. Yes,
spoke total truth, his authentic self. Hence
different era, though, Radzi.
Different
That's
era.
the point. They don't exist anymore. Those big beasts don't exist in politics anymore.
Well, and people who are connected to some sort of underlying, perhaps political philosophy as well, that actually care about what they're doing.
People who care, exactly.
As opposed to wanting to be the next management consultant. Yes. People complain about that too. Brighton, Nick, are you won over by President Trump?
No, I'm not.
Well, why not?
Donald Trump is a maniac. Okay. He is a self-serving maniac, and I'm horrified that people are. I know people that are being won over by him, including Carole on your panel, apparently.
Nick, can I ask you a question? Do you understand the threat of Iran to the rest of the world? Does that not bother you?
And do you know what, Carole? I actually admire you for your intellect and your intelligence. And what worries me is you're one of the people that worries me, because an intelligent person being won over by Donald Trump, who to me is just a self-serving maniac.
You can be self-serving and smart at the same time. But I ask you the question, do you understand the threat of Iran to the rest of the world?
My father was in Iran when the Shah was brought down.
Wow.
Yeah.
By the Khomeini people, but by the mullahs.
You understand?
And he had to come out of Iran in a bus covered in posters of Ayatollah Khomeini. So I understand the threat of Iran completely.
So do you think we should have just let them go on building the nuclear weapons?
I don't think anyone should have interfered with them.
Oh.
Israel was bombing Iran. Iran was bombing Israel. Why did Trump decide to interfere? Why
well, the
did
answer
he
to that,
have a go?
you make a point. The answer to that is because, frankly, they're the only people that had the necessary hardware and muscle to blow up the underground bunkers where the nuclear fuel, the uranium, was being enriched to the grade required to make a weapon. One of the problems, and thanks for your call, Nick, is overnight there's been some suggestion, in fact, a leak from the Pentagon, which suggests that those bombs haven't necessarily worked. And rather than obliterating them in the way that Trump has claimed, actually, all it's done is put that programme back only a few months. And if that's right, well, then we're back to square one. But it's interesting, that previous caller from Brighton, because if what Trump has said wasn't true, in other words, it wasn't obliterated, and we discover that down the line, then all of this authenticity is, well, nonsense.
This is, like I said, this is an unnamed source, probably a Democrat who hates Trump and who hates what he's doing. So it's very easy to put that sort of stuff out there without backing up. If they back it up, yeah, I don't believe that it didn't do the job. Why would he do it if he wasn't going to do it properly?
Well, I mean, the question is, it wouldn't be the first time that he's told a porky pie or exaggerated. One only needs to remember the first inauguration, where it was the highest attended ever, apparently. Not sure it was. Valerie, in Greater Manchester, you won over by the Trumpster?
I don't need to be won over. I was already a convert. But first of all, Rob, I would like to say your previous caller, he belongs back in Iran because of his condescending attitude towards women, the way he spoke to Carole on the panel. He wants smacking. But that said, Trump has done the world a service. I couldn't imagine anything worse than Iran with a nuclear bomb. And these people that cannot see it, I don't understand where they're coming from.
So your point is that...
where was Keir Starmer when all this was happening?
Right, yeah, well, the point is that it's deliverance, as you would say, and that there's a number of people saying this, that there was a worry that President Trump was going in for regime change. There's been no regime change there, but when you're talking about the Iranian regime as it exists, this terrible, without any question, theocracy, which undermines, to say the very least, the rights of women and the marginalised. The question is, what happens now, and the extent to which they might be able to rise up. I guess those are the people that you're worried about, as well as all of the regional people in the area who are threatened by Iran having a nuclear bomb.
Just very quickly, Rob, what I'd be curious to know is, for anyone watching who's a Trump supporter, I'd be curious to know what they think he should do if the bombs weren't as effective as we believe them to be. Does he now interrupt the peace that he's forced two countries to hold? Or does he say, my work here is now done? What is the right thing for him to do?
Well, that may be something that we're going to have to answer, not least because there might be escalation in due course. And we're going to...